can't mark a date and believe that that day you can turn it on. It's not about the date. It's about the commitment to yourself. It's about dating your purpose. It's about marrying yourself to your goals. It's about realizing that there is no one coming to save you but you. You have to be willing to put in the work. You must be willing to walk into success. You must be able to run past doubt. You must be able to go through the barbed wire of self-doubt and deprecating words that you have placed over yourself and tried to play it off like it was a joke, when in reality you truly believe that you don't deserve things. It's time now for you to speak life over yourself.
Losing. Most of you hear losing and it makes you cringe, it makes you afraid, you fear being embarrassed, you fear being judged, you fear looking like an idiot in front of a bunch of people that won't matter to you in 5 years. But here's the thing, being willing to fail, being willing to lose, will create such a competitive advantage for you because most people can't do it. Most people can't be seen falling on their face. So our options are to stay the same or to actually be willing to fail.
This is your time. You have greatness in you, and everything that happens to you, I've come to know. Some things happen to you, some things happen for you.
And that is what I do. And that is what you can do too. If you have something to change, if you want to change something, change it. Change it now.
Hi, Marcus. Thank you so much for joining on the podcast. Sorry, can you see your last name? Because I hate to get it incorrect.
To say it wrong. Yeah, my last name's Seidel.
Seidel. Okay, that's what I thought, but I was like, oh, I don't want to get it wrong. All right.
People do get it wrong pretty often.
Yeah, I know, I can imagine. So, but yeah, I'm really excited to have you here. And could you briefly just introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So, like we said, my name is Marcus Seidel. I guess things that are relative to this particular podcast. I've been a bodybuilder for well over a decade. I don't really know when I would consider my starting point, but it was in the mid to late 2000s. I've been a contest prep coach since, again, hard to really define the exact starting point there, but we'll say 2013-ish, 2012, 2013. I've been doing in-person personal training for a while now as well. Although I've been certified to do so for a very long time. I played college basketball, so I have a long history in kind of the fitness industry, as it would be called. But I've kind of worn various hats in the industry over the years. And now, as of about 6 weeks ago, I'm also a gym owner. It's a private personal training gym here in St. Louis, Missouri, which is where I live. It's called 2.0 Training Systems. And like I said, it's a private personal training gym. There's no memberships or anything, but that's kind of been the newest and currently most exciting endeavor in the fitness industry.
Wow, congratulations on that. That's awesome.
Thank you.
So yeah, that was a pretty good introduction, because normally that's how I kind of start, is, asking like, oh, so when did, you get into fitness and stuff like that, which you kind of, briefly touched on. But I guess at what point then did you start getting into like the competitions and like real like bodybuilding?
So like I said, I was an athlete my entire life, played college basketball. So for me, being competitive is always something, it's something that I've always just craved my entire life. I really, really love, the art of competition, if you will. I love competing against other people. I love competing against myself, which I've, come to find over the years that it doesn't have to be competing against other people. It's more so that I can just channel that same thing by competing against myself. And so when I got done playing basketball in college, which was in 2009, I really needed to transition into something where I could remain competitive. Otherwise, I just was, I felt lost. And so I had always been heavily interested in bodybuilding, like since I was like a little kid, before I really understood what bodybuilding as a sport really was. I was just fascinated by, muscle. I just always thought having big muscles would be a really cool thing. So once I got done playing basketball in college, I kind of gave myself an ultimatum. It was either going to be MMA or bodybuilding. Definitely made the right decision. I'm very glad that I went with bodybuilding instead of MMA, although MMA is cool. I'm just glad I never participated in it. And so that's kind of how I got into like physically participating in bodybuilding. And then it was a pretty easy transition from there into prepping people, doing, getting other people, helping other people with bodybuilding.
Awesome. And have you done any competitions then?
I've done a lot. Yeah, I've done a bunch. Yeah. My first show was in 2011. I've done 16, I think, 15 or 16. I don't even remember now. 15 or 16 shows. I generally, throughout my career, I typically will compete one period of the year, and I may do one or two, maybe multiple shows. Sometimes just one, but either way, yeah, I've done somewhere over 15 shows, something like that.
Wow, that's quite a good amount. And what division have you been in?
Always bodybuilding. When I started competing, that was the only division for men bodybuilding. Well, the first year I competed was the first year they had men's physique, actually. Classic physique didn't exist yet. And the first show that I ever did, although men's physique, it was the first year for men's physique, the show that I had didn't even offer it. So, yeah, always been a bodybuilder. I started out as a heavyweight. I kind of grew into the super heavyweight class for probably about half of my career, we'll say. And now I'm kind of on the way back down. My most recent show was this past fall in October, and I was a heavyweight again because I've kind of taken a little bit of a step back in the sport as a competitor anyway, just because it's not as much of a priority as the career and everything else are. So I lost a little bit of muscle, which is fine. That was intentional. So anyway, yeah, always been a bodybuilder, either the heavyweight or super heavyweight class.
Okay, got it. And have you qualified for pro yet, or is that something that even is on the books, or?
I've been qualified most of my career nationally, so I could compete in pro qualifiers. And I've done a few, but I'm not a pro. It's just a hard thing to do. And again, for me, it's a hard thing to kind of also explain, because the amount of muscle that you have to have in the bodybuilding division is kind of crazy, especially the bigger your frame is, the more muscle is necessary. And I'm 5'11". I have a pretty big, wide frame. 5'11", I know, is not super tall, but in bodybuilding, it's pretty tall. It's very tall in bodybuilding, which is weird. Again, coming from a basketball background where I was always the shortest guy.
Right.
Now I'm the tallest guy. Weird. But anyway, the amount of muscle necessary on a frame like mine, you just got to be a really, really big guy. And in order to accomplish that, there's just a lot of things that I'm just not willing to do anymore to try to achieve that. Back in like between 2017 and 2019, I would say if I really would have, dived in really, really hard and kept pushing things, I probably could have come close. And I still think it's possible in one of the masters classes, like masters nationals or masters USAs. I think I could still maybe pull it off and turn pro, but it's just not a big priority of mine anymore.
Yeah.
The only reason I would have any desire to do it is because unfortunately, just having that IFBB next to your name gives people like a perceived credibility business wise. People think, oh, my coach is an IFBB pro, so they must really know something.
Right.
Which really doesn't mean anything. But again, even if people perceive it that way, it's a good way to, at least help acquire clients.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate the honesty and just where where you are. So that's awesome. All right. So now I wanted to dive into a few of the topics that I know you for, because I know you from Instagram, and I've been following you for a while on there. And so these are just some of the points that I was like, okay, I just really love how you are passionate. I can tell about these points and these topics. So yeah, I wanted to dive in with you on those. And the first one is the 5 key components of effective training. And yeah, so I know you have there's a post, and I just want to bring it onto the actual podcast where you talk about optimal exercise selection. So I guess if we can dive in a little bit into that part first.
Yeah, I'd be happy to dive into all of them. I'm very passionate about this stuff, because this really pertains to not only myself as a bodybuilder, but myself as a bodybuilding coach, and something that I try to apply to the best of my ability with all of my clients as well as myself. And it's something that I really think is lacking in the industry as a whole. There's a lot of kind of bad information out there, and there's a lot of overthinking too. It's not just about the bad information. It's more so about the individuals overthinking every little aspect of how to build muscle. And so again, the first thing that you brought up, which is, the first thing on the priority list in the post, which is optimal exercise selection. With optimal exercise selection is really not overly complicated, but the easiest way to describe it is most people can't get out of their own way because they perceive optimal exercise selection as selecting the exercises that they enjoy doing the most and the ones that they are best at. So you've got some guys, let's just say you're a good bench presser. For whatever reason, you have a really strong bench press. Well, a lot of guys will just hone in on that bench press and use have that be their biggest focal point of their training, because really in reality, the reason that they're probably doing it is because when they go in the gym, they can put a bunch of plates on the bar and impress everybody else there. Maybe that's actually helping your chest development, or your chest, your triceps, your shoulder development, maybe. But maybe it's also not. And if it's not, then it's probably not something that you need to be prioritizing, despite the fact that you're really good at it. So that was kind of a long-winded way of describing the fact that you need to make sure that the movements that you're doing in your training programming are movements that are conducive to you getting the most output and the most results, not just the ones that you enjoy doing the most or the ones that you're the best at. Sometimes the movements that you're the worst at are the ones that are the most important for you to actually grow. And or maybe it's movements that you just don't really enjoy all that much, but they're going to be the ones that are most necessary for you to grow. And so when you get out of your own way and start doing the stuff that's actually going to be best for you rather than the stuff that you're best at, that's where people really start to see a big difference. And that's why that's the first bullet point of that particular post.
Right. And then something to add on too is probably, I'm sure you can agree on, is the importance of it as a beginner, right? And then also as you progress and become more of an intermediate and advanced trainer, you have to really prioritize what is going to be effective towards where you are and where you're going.
100%. Yeah, exactly. And it's really, as you become more advanced, or just as you gain more and more experience in it, getting out of your own way in regards to what was I going to say? Really just getting out of the bad habits that most people develop when they are brand new to it is one of the hardest. It's one of the hardest things to do, which is, another reason this post is really important, because I think it gives people who've maybe been in it for a while some perspective that maybe I'm still just stuck doing the things that I was doing when I very first started doing this.
Yeah.
And maybe it really isn't the best way. I just don't know any other way because this is what I've always done.
Right. And then, another thing I just want to quickly add on too is like, even coming from a female perspective, I remember when I first started, I was like doing so much accessory work and volume that was unnecessary. And I like regret being able to go back and being like, let me just focus on a few of these compounds and doing that.
So that actually ties in with another one of the bullet points in the particular post that you're talking about, which is appropriate training volume. So not only do you need to so those two kind of intertwine, like you're saying, like if you're using a bunch of movements that are just kind of easier or that you enjoy doing more, that's not necessarily benefiting you that much. But also, I think one of the most common things people do is they use a bunch of wasted volume, or junk volume, as I like to call it. They're just doing more and more and more exercises and more sets and more reps just so that they can say they did a lot. But a lot of that stuff's just not even really benefiting you due to the fact that you've already completely taxed the muscle and now you're just kind of putting it through the motions. Really all that's doing is making it a little bit more difficult to recover, and not necessarily like implementing anything that's going to make the muscle respond better in the way of hypertrophy. So yeah, like the point that you just made kind of tied in a lot of the different bullet points that go into that, to the post that you're referencing.
Yeah. And so moving on to the second point that you made was proper execution of each exercise.
That's the biggest one. And that's the one that I think more so than anything, I think people have themselves convinced that they are executing the movements that they're doing perfectly. And in reality, almost no one ever is. There's one person, honestly, this is going to sound crazy. I believe that there is one human being on planet Earth that I have ever seen execute every set and every rep of their workouts perfectly. And that's Michaela Aycock. I don't know if you know who she is. She's a female bodybuilder, IFBB pro. She started out, I want to say, as like a figure competitor. Maybe she may have done women's physique, but she was very undersized in women's physique. Either way, she's put on more muscle on her frame than I've like ever seen anyone put on. And it's truly a result of the way that she trains. And when it comes to proper execution, I've never seen anyone, male, female, any experience level, never seen anyone train like her.
Wow.
Aside from literally her, I don't think any human being executes every rep of every set perfectly. And my point is, it's always something that you should be striving for. And the minute that you think you really know how to do a movement perfectly is the minute that you might need to realize maybe I'm not, and maybe there's ways for me to improve my execution of these movements. Because from my own observation, both in my gym or in commercial gyms, videos that people post, we've all consumed a million different, pieces of content of people's training, and I almost never see anyone execute any movement perfectly. It's extremely rare. And it's not an easy thing to do, myself included. Like, I'm not being critical of everyone else. I'm also included in this. Proper execution of each set, each rep throughout an entire workout, throughout an entire year is really, really a hard thing to do, which is why you really need to focus on it every single time. A lot of people just go in the gym and they kind of go through the motions. And to be clear, I'm not criticizing people's actual effort. I think people are working hard. I just think that they're not, well, we've all heard the phrase, like, don't work harder, work smarter.
Right.
I think people are really not very good at the work smarter thing when it comes to the little details
Mm-hmm.
of executing each movement that they're doing.
Right. Now, would you consider the execution is like the same as technique?
Yeah, there's a few different kind of interchangeable words that describe it. I don't like to use the word form because, I mean, one, it's kind of a cliche term, but two, there's a difference between your form and the way you're actually executing a movement. Um, your form is more so just like the positioning you're putting your body in, and that's important too, of course. But if you're not actually internally engaging the proper muscles and attempting to the best of your ability eliminate other muscles that accommodate the muscle you're trying to train. So for example, to be more precise about what I mean by that, let's say you're doing a cable row and you're trying to put all the stimulus on your lats on a cable row. Well, there's several different cues you can use to prevent your traps and rear delts and your rhomboids from getting involved in that movement so that your lats can carry, the lion's share of that load, preferably as close to 100% of that load as possible.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not focused on the precision of those things by eliminating those other muscles and focusing all the attention and getting the right mechanics to make all of the tension go to where you want it to, which in this case would be the lats, you're missing out on a large percentage of the results that could come along with it. And again, you could have good form and still not have proper execution. If you're in the right position, to an outsider, to even me as your trainer potentially, it's kind of hard sometimes to tell if you're engaging the right muscles. Just by watching you do it, you're the only one who actually knows. And so again, imagine if I took 300 milligrams and the next thing you know, people are just loading themselves up with a bunch of drugs they don't understand, thinking that if I take more and more and more of this, I'm going to get more and more and more results. It's just an extremism that comes along with bodybuilding. But, I've always taken it upon myself to try to talk people out of that.
Yeah, it's funny how the psychological aspect of the society more and more and more, it just even goes into fitness and bodybuilding as well. So, and then our next point is effort.
Yep. So, and again, literally all of these tie in with each other. But when it
Right.
comes to effort, I think people train, you hear a lot of criticism, especially via social media, of people claiming that other people don't train hard. Everybody wants to be the tough guy. So everybody, everybody paints themselves in this, I outwork everybody light, and everyone else is just there to record themselves and put their tripod up and go through these weak ass sets and whatever. And it's like, I don't think there's that many people that are not putting effort into their training. People are putting some effort into their training, but again, where they miss the boat is they're training with too much volume, and so the effort, the ability to give maximum effort is not there because they're doing too many things. So again, if you're training with appropriate volume, which in my opinion is probably less than what most people are doing, you're able to give more effort to each individual set. So, you're able to get maximum output with less stuff if you give maximum output to the small amount of sets that you're actually doing. And when you're doing these like 6-7 days a week training splits where you're training for 2 hours a day and you're doing 8 different movements for biceps, you physically are not capable of giving maximum effort to every single set. No matter, it might be maximum effort, but the word maximum is diminished radically when you're doing, again, way too many movements for whatever muscle group you're training. So yeah, the effort is one of the most important things. Like if you can necessitate recovery, you can train with perfect execution, you can train with the appropriate amount of volume, but if you're not training hard, if you're not really putting in maximum effort to every single set, it's all of the other stuff kind of goes out the window. That's what's kind of crazy about this post is like there's 5 different bullet points that I find to be the most important for optimally training. And you can't, if you're doing 4 out of 5 of them right, it doesn't matter. You have to do all 5. Like
Mm-hmm.
the minute you the minute you take one of these 5 away, it diminishes everything. So again, you could do the other 4 that, you know, that we've mentioned 3 of perfectly, but if your effort isn't there, doesn't even matter.
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree. So I'm glad that you bring that also up. And then our last one here is the sufficient recovery. I mean, which we've already kind of, you know, tapped into, because like you said, everything, you know, goes together, everything ties together. But talk a little bit more about sufficient recovery. What does that even, I guess, what does that even mean? Because sometimes people think that recovery is like what? Like they don't understand what actual recovery means.
For sure. Recovery is kind of it's kind of a tricky one too, because it doesn't present itself in really obvious ways. So I think what most people assume is that if they're no longer sore, that their muscle is fully recovered, and that's not necessarily the case. It might be the case, but it's not always the case. There's just too many different things that go into optimal recovery, and you don't always know. Even if you're doing everything right, you don't always know if you're recovering 100%, because there's just too many things that factor into it. Your own stress, your external stressors that you don't have any control over contribute to your recovery, which is why I think controlling as much of it as you possibly can is so important. The biggest one is sleep. Human beings are the only species on the entire planet that actively goes out of their way to get less sleep than they need. I mean, we all have, you know, most people have pets, or at least have had pets. They sleep all day, right? Like, do you have a dog? I don't know if you have a dog. I have dogs.
No, I don't, but yes.
But you've seen it. We've all observed.
Yeah.
They lay around and they sleep all day. And if you look at almost any other animals in the animal kingdom, they all do that too. Because they, you know, biologically, they don't know any differently other than to, you know, recover. I'm using quote fingers here, recover optimally, so that their bodies can function, their minds can function, and so that they can do the things that they need to do optimally. We as human beings are on our phones and watching Netflix and staring at screens and staying up later than we need to, or I think a lot of people even wake up earlier than they need to. That's something that you know, isn't talked about very often, because that's considered virtuous to wake up too early. People almost wear a lack of sleep as like a badge of honor. Like, I only slept 4 hours last night and I'm still getting it done. And I'm like, well, are you getting it done, or are you just like bragging about the fact that you didn't sleep enough?
Right.
Sleep is the one that we pretty much all have at least some control over. And so, and I think most people get insufficient amount of sleep, so they definitely aren't recovering well, because that's definitely the period of time where recovery is at its highest, is when you're sleeping. But aside from just that, there's more than just that. You can break it down on a micro scale, in between sets, even like your little short-term recovery from one set to another. A lot of people take short rest periods thinking that, you know, if I keep my heart rate up, or if I'm more out of breath, it'll make my workout harder, which will, you know, in turn make it better. That's wrong too. You know, you need to take sufficient rest periods between sets on a micro scale, so that the sets that you're doing, you can give maximum effort to. If you're still out of breath from your last set and you go into your next set, you don't have the capability of giving full effort.
Yeah.
And so on a micro scale, even taking sufficient rest periods between sets, that's super important, all the way up to getting a sufficient amount of sleep. And again, and when you go back to the appropriate amount of volume, that plays into it too. If you're training with, you know, too many sets, too many reps, too many exercises, it's going to make it harder and harder for you to recover from that too. So there's a lot of different ways you can view recovery. But again, it's something that I think people need to put a little bit bigger emphasis on, rather than train more, think recover more. Like, it's just one of those really, really small, nuanced details that I think people, I don't even want to say that they overlook. I just think that they don't necessarily pay attention to it in the first place.
So then how would this, I guess, apply when using machines, for example, and accommodating those to, like, you know, the individual's body mechanics?
Right. And so now we can go back to exercise selection. So if there's a particular machine that you're using, because let's just say it's a shoulder machine. If you don't fit into that machine well, like if your anatomy doesn't necessarily fit that machine's profile properly, it might not be a good machine for you individually to use. Like if you're not feeling it properly, if you're not able to get in the right position to where that machine is going to accommodate exactly what you're trying to accomplish, then maybe don't use that machine. Despite the fact that the machine says it's a shoulder machine and you're training shoulders, if it's not training your shoulders the way that you need your shoulders to be trained due to the ergonomics of the machine itself, then that machine's probably not for you, and you should probably scrap that from your exercise selection and move on to something that's going to accommodate what you're trying to do a little bit better. So that, again, that kind of ties into the first bullet point, which is exercise selection again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely does. And yeah, thank you for that, because I think that's really important, that these are all like little nuances that like are so important, but like no one really talks about and no one really knows. So great information here. And then the point number 3 is appropriate training volume.
I think almost everybody, I shouldn't say almost everybody, that's a little too blanket of a statement, but a vast majority of people, at least in my own observation, I think use a lot more volume than they really need to. And what happens when you're using too much volume is you're getting more quantity and less quality. So if you're training biceps, for example, that's something that everybody does pretty equally. If you're doing more than just a few movements for your biceps, you're probably doing more than you need to. One, it's going to make it harder to recover. Two, your effort within each of those additional reps beyond where you really needed to go in the first place are probably not going to be very good. And really, at the end of the day, you're just stretching and contracting the muscle with no actual, added benefit. There's a certain point where you're the analogy I like to use is, it's like pumping gasoline into a tank that's already full. And I think a lot of people do that. They tax the muscle as far as it really needs to, and as far as it can go before you're unable to recover from a workout. And then they do more for the sake of thinking, if I do more, I'm going to get more results. You hear people say all the time, okay, so my quads are a weak point, or whatever muscle, you can insert any muscle in there. My quads are a weak point. So this year I'm going to do quads 3 times a week. And it's like, well, what makes you think that doing them more is going to make them grow more? There's just no evidence whatsoever to support the idea that you can just do something more and have it benefit you, at least as it pertains to like physiological processes. A skill, like if you want to be a great free throw shooter, yeah, you need to shoot. You need to, one, learn how to shoot free throws very, very well. And then you need to do that repetitively over and over and over to develop that skill. Training and muscle hypertrophy is a physiological process, not a skill. And so you can't just do more and more and more and more of it and then get more and more and more and more results. Like I said, you're going to go over what you're able to recover from. And I think a lot of people hinder their progress by training too much. I'll just give you an example for myself. When I started growing the most I've ever grown, I was training 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The total amount of movements I would do for any particular muscle group in a workout was maybe 3. I don't ever really do more than 3 exercises for any specific muscle group on any specific training day. And is one, what happens when you train like that is you're able to give a lot more effort to the sets that you are doing, because I don't have 6 other movements to do after this. I'm almost done already. Really kill it and really hone in on the specifics we were talking about earlier, executing the movements properly and all that kind of stuff. And all 5 different bullet points kind of are able to come into play more efficiently, but and you can recover more. So, people need to think more about, if you want to do something more and get more results, recover more. Don't train more, recover more. That's where you're actually building muscle, is during the period of recovery.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean, I mean, obviously you're going to need something to recover from. So you need to train really hard, which is another one of the bullet points, isn't it? Effort, right? Yeah, it's the next one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you have to train hard in order to necessitate that, that recovery time. But if you're training like every single day, I just don't see why. It makes it very difficult to recover, and the workouts are probably a lot less efficient. So the appropriate amount of volume people should be using, I think in most cases, should probably be less. And it's not just me. I've seen it with many, many clients. There's also quite a bit of data that would indicate the same thing, that training with a little bit less volume, but better exercise selection, more effort, more recovery time is what actually is going to lead to more results, more muscle growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I did the same thing where I started to prioritize just as much the recovery and taking more days off. And I was like, oh shit, that's when I made the most growth too. So, yep.
Exactly. It's a hard thing to get out of, because most things that we do in life require repetition. The more of it you do, the more time you spend doing something, typically the better you get at it. And so when you come into this bodybuilding realm, in training and trying to build muscle, it's logical for you to think, okay, I need to do more. Like, if I trained for 1 hour 5 times a week and I got these results, okay, that's cool. But if I want more results, then I guess I should train 7 days a week for 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Surely that's better. People do the same thing with, supplementation, PED usage. If I use 100 milligrams of this and I get these results.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say as far as like, in terms of like the whole listening to your body aspect, and how you go about taking rest days in between, your workouts and stuff? Is that helpful too?
It is. I think that's one that's more like, if you're in prep, I think that's listening to your body is something that I think people need to be more in tune with during a period of prep when you're more depleted. Off season too, but again, if you're training to the point where you're like chronically sore and chronically tired when you're in a calorie surplus, you're probably just training with too much volume already. Like, you should just back off on the volume immediately if that's happening. During prep, when you're in a calorie deficit and you're doing a lot of cardio and you're beating your body up in other ways, it is very important to listen to your body, because sometimes, you're going to have a tendency to want to push and push and push. The show's coming up. It's 4 weeks out. Maybe I'm a little bit behind, and, I woke up today in just complete pain, and I'm super tired and I'm miserable and my body hurts. And I don't know how the hell I'm going to get through this workout, but I need to do it because I'm getting closer to that show. That's a point where you probably should listen to your body, because you're probably going to benefit more from taking a day off or resting, or kind of just, skipping that workout for a day and pushing your programming back a day or whatever, rather than trying to run yourself further and further into the ground. Like, yes, it's calories in versus calories out. Like, in order to lose fat, you have to burn more than you're taking in. But at a certain point, when you're just super depleted and beat up from all the different stuff you're putting yourself through, like, your body's going to become very resistant to change. And it's going to be a lot quicker to adapt to what you're doing if you don't give it some, listen to your body and give it some form of a break and a little bit of a rest.
Right. And this is a side point, but what about like deloads? As we're speaking about like recovery and stuff, how does that apply?
Deloads are very important. That's another one that I think people are pretty resistant to, because I think people enjoy the process of getting stronger and moving more weight and stuff like that. But yeah, deloading is for me, I don't do a lot of deloads. For me, it's a lot easier for me to just take a week off. And sometimes that's what I encourage my clients to do. But I also am aware that most people are just, it's like pulling teeth to get people to take an entire week off of training, or more. I mean, I've gone periods where I took six consecutive weeks off of training just intuitively. And people are like, you're crazy. You're going to lose everything. I'm like, well, according to all the data, you're not going to lose anything. It's just, you're giving your body a really significant break where you're actually probably going to recover to the point that you'll grow more than you otherwise would have when you do come back. But I get it. People think they're going to lose their gains when they take time off. So for those people, a deload week is just it's an easy, happy medium. It's like you can still go to the gym, you can still train, but you're going to reduce the volume. You're going to reduce the amount of weight that you're using. You're not going to go to failure. It's just going to be easy. You're kind of going to go in there and just go through the motions, keep blood flow through the muscles, stuff like that. So yeah, deloading is a way to not stop training, but still enhance your recovery. So it is definitely a very valuable tool. I'm one that typically for myself, I would rather just take an entire week off, but I do program deloads for people a lot because they just don't want to take that week off. It's like you would think that I'm giving people a prison sentence when I tell them that just not go to the gym.
Yeah. Now, just real quick too, how would you program or implement deloads, or even if a person does decide to take off like a full week, how do you program or implement that?
The best way to do that, in my opinion, for one, you kind of need to be tracking pretty diligently what you're doing in the gym to begin with. Like if you're following whatever programming it is, you're going to be doing some repetitive stuff, but throughout that repetition, you need to be attempting to progress in one way or another. Progressive overload, if we've all heard the terminology. Something I used to talk about a lot, and I talk about less because I feel like it's become a little bit misconceived. But if you're implementing progressive overload, meaning like if you squatted today and you got 200 pounds for 9 reps, your goal for the next workout would be to either add weight. In that case, I shouldn't have given such a specific example, but either way, you should either attempt to add weight, add reps, or, and probably most importantly, improve your execution of that movement. That's another nuanced way of achieving progressive overload without adding weight or reps. When you get to a point that you're unable to achieve that, when you're not making progress anymore, where you've gone 4 weeks in a row where you've attempted to add weight or reps and you just can't, or your execution has improved, but you're just getting a little bit weaker. Maybe you're experiencing a little bit of tendonitis, more chronic soreness, things like that. Then it's probably a good time for you to take a deload week, or again, maybe just take an entire week off of training entirely.
Okay. Yeah, that's really helpful information.
And that goes back into, you asked about listening to your body. That's actually a really good example of listening to your body.
Yeah,
like
true.
You're attempting to make all these different, pathways of progress, and none of them are happening, and you're sore and you're tired, and maybe more so than usual, then you need to listen to your body and make those adjustments.
Yeah. Now, do you think that, say you're going through a higher level period of stress, does that almost like that's going to affect, a lot of your progress in the gym, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a tough one because it is something that you don't have a whole lot of control over in most cases. So it's easy for me or you to tell other people, like, try to reduce your external stressors the best that you can, but a lot of that you don't have any control over. A lot of that comes from your job, your career, relationships, it could be anything. It could be side of the business here in the gym. And again, we're only 6 weeks in, and that's already happening and trending in a way that is very, very good. So that's my biggest goal. My actual physique, like bodybuilding goals, I'm training, I'm staying on top of my nutrition, and I'm still doing my hiking, not as rigorously or as often as I do during prep, obviously, but So I'm staying in shape. I'm kind of in striking distance. I think I could be ready for a show in 5 or 6 weeks if I needed to be, which has never been the case for me. And normally I get really, really big and heavy and have to lose a lot of weight to be ready for shows. And so it's kind of, for me, like, bodybuilding is not really a priority for me individually, but I also like am keeping it an option by keeping my nutrition and cardio and stuff on point so that I don't get too far out of shape. So I'll probably compete this year in 2023, but I don't have any specific plans or anything for that, because everything I'm doing is kind of revolves around this gym. So
Right, that's awesome. And then is there anything else that you would like to add, I guess, right before we close off?
Nah, nothing that comes to mind.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing that we didn't, nothing that jumps out at me that we haven't already covered. I think we covered some pretty good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we definitely did, and I definitely appreciate it. Definitely could go on some more, but yeah, thank you so much for joining me and for sharing everything that you shared. It was great. It was really in depth, and I think we were able to really express a lot here. So thank you so much.
I totally agree, and I appreciate you having me.
Yeah. All right, Marcus, thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Thank you.
Literally be anything. Could be a death in the family. It could be whatever. I mean, there's a million different things that could contribute to stress. And if you don't have control over it, there's not a whole lot that you can do outside of just trying to manage your reaction to that stress the best that you can. But yeah, those things definitely factor in and can definitely hinder your progress, unfortunately. And again, when you have no control over that, it makes it a little bit more complicated. But again, your reaction to external stressors is the only thing you have a little bit of control over. And so if you can, avoid stressing yourself out even more, then, do that. But again, that's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, diving in a little bit into another point is cardio, because I had seen, again, something that you posted, and because it's like normally a lot of the times people either I feel like there's a black or white kind of connotation when it comes to cardio. Either people are on prep and they're doing it, or maybe if it's like a lifestyle person, then they're like really focused on it because they're trying to lose weight. But no one really talks about the in-between of what cardio can also be useful for.
Yeah, cardio is something that especially in bodybuilding has kind of become demonized in a strange way. One, there was always this narrative surrounding bodybuilding that doing a bunch of cardio is going to make you cannibalize all your muscle. Well, that's not true. Like, doing cardio doesn't make you lose muscle. It just doesn't. There's never been data that's indicated that. Yeah, it will reduce your calorie surplus. Like, if you're in a calorie surplus, which you need to be in order to build muscle, adding a bunch of cardio is going to reduce that surplus, or maybe even eliminate that surplus. But all that means is that you can eat more. So cool, right? Like, that's kind of a good thing. The other thing is that people only do cardio, in bodybuilding, 99% of competitors, regardless of the division, whether it's bikini all the way up to bodybuilding, most people typically just do this very monotonous, typical bodybuilder cardio, Stairmaster. I mean, anyone who's listening to this that's ever competed knows exactly. They knew I was going to say that because they've all done it, myself included. I've spent countless hours on a Stairmaster machine, or the treadmill or the elliptical. Like, those are kind of the big three. Maybe you might add like a recumbent bike in there, but those are okay. We'll call those the big four. Well, there's nothing more boring than that in the entire world. And because of that, everybody kind of gangs up on cardio. Like, oh, cardio sucks. It's so boring. It's so lame. I'm dreading cardio. myself included, if I'm just going to stand on a hamster wheel for an hour, that no one enjoys that. That sucks. And so for those, for those specific reasons, people have made cardio out to be this huge enemy of the sport and just kind of a necessary evil for getting lean. Mm-hmm. People really need to look at it a lot differently, because in the off season, cardio is just as valuable as cardio is during prep. Maybe even more so technically, because one, it will prevent you from gaining a lot of fat. Gaining a lot of fat in and of itself is a huge hindrance to muscle building. You're going to get more insulin resistant, which is going to make it a lot more difficult for your body to partition nutrients to allow you to, achieve muscle protein synthesis and actually grow. You're also going to be, the more body fat you gain, you're going to be more lethargic. So your training's probably not going to be, we go back to that effort thing we were talking about. Your effort's probably not going to be there because you're going to be more lazy and lethargic because you've gained body fat. Your heart also, and the bigger you are as a person, again, I'll go into, people like myself, like super heavyweight bodybuilders, we're big people. That's hard on your heart, just being big. We don't even have to talk about drugs or anything. Just being a big person, even if it's muscle, is very difficult on your heart. So you want to have heart health. That's important just for your overall health and longevity in the sport, if you want to keep it, a bodybuilding thing. So cardio really has countless benefits that actually will allow you to build more muscle, be healthier, feel better, sleep better. All of these things are a result of doing cardio. Now, does your cardio in the off season need to be as rigorous or as long of a duration as it is during prep? No, probably not. But I think that people should always be doing some form of cardio. The key component, and this is something that I learned very recently, is find cardio that you actually enjoy.
Yeah.
It's when you come to the realization, it's like a come to Jesus moment with yourself. When you find a form of cardio that you like doing, oh, dude, the whole world changes.
Yeah.
I fell in love with hiking. I'll be honest. I enjoy hiking. I'm more passionate about hiking than I am about training. Easily. It's not even close, actually. Like,
wow.
My most recent prep, every single cardio session I did was on a hiking trail. I did no cardio in the gym. And I at the time, my gym's in my basement. I had a Stairmaster, a bike, and a treadmill in my house, in my basement. And I didn't touch them once because I did all my cardio hiking outdoors on a hiking trail. One, it was the most productive cardio I've ever done by far. The intensity I was able to display doing that type of cardio exceeded anything I've ever done in a gym in my life. And I loved every second of it. Like, I enjoyed every second of my cardio. I looked forward to it. Like, on my way to the hiking trail, I would get this sense of excitement, like recess. When you're a little kid and it's almost time for recess at school, oh my God, I get to do the fun stuff now. That's how I felt on my way to do cardio. And if you can get to that point, your whole world changes, because it's like the stuff that I used to hate, that I used to dread doing, now I love it. And your entire outlook on the whole thing changes. It makes contest prep easy in a way, because it's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting that you mentioned that too, because it's like, I don't mind doing cardio and I don't, need to do too much or whatever, but I do a little bit. But I'm just kind of thinking, you know what, maybe I should try like dance class or something and use that as my cardio, Absolutely. So it's like people don't think about other things that we can do as part of our cardio.
There's a really it's just like nutrition. It's calories in versus calories out. There's really no bad form of cardio. There's less efficient forms of cardio for sure, but all cardio is fine. At the end of the day, it just comes down to the amount of calories that you burned, and your nutrition will take care of everything else. Your nutrition and supplementation will determine, like, are you losing fat or muscle? Yeah, if you're not eating anything, if you're eating like 20 grams of protein a day and you're not eating a sufficient amount of food to fuel what you're doing, you might lose some muscle by doing a lot of cardio, a lot of rigorous cardio. But you're not, like, if you're a competitor, you're not. So that's not something that needs to be a concern of yours. So literally, and here's the other thing, and most people, I'm not even included in this demographic, but most people nowadays, have, their Apple Watch or their whatever. There's a million different, ways to track your cardio without it being on a machine in front of you. Like if you have the apps or the watch or the little chest harness thingies that are tracking heart rate and the distance that you're going and the calories that you're burning, regardless of how accurate those numbers are, the ones on the treadmill are probably even less accurate than the ones on those watches. So, I mean, if it's there is no really extremely accurate way to track how many real calories you're burning and your exact distance. And so we have so many resources for that. It's like, dude, just wear your watch on a hiking trail or in a dance class or whatever it is that would be fun and exciting for you to do pertaining to cardio, and then track it and then compare that to what it's like doing a Stairmaster session. And if it's close, or especially if it's better for the cardio that you enjoy, then do the cardio you enjoy. Yeah. There's no rule that says you have to do a Stairmaster to lose fat. There's no indication that doing Stairmaster is superior in any way for fat loss compared to other things. And I can use myself as an anecdote. Doing the cardio that I was doing on the hiking trail, I burned infinitely more fat doing that than I ever did doing gym cardio. I mean, it's not even close.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. Cause I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that. So that's awesome that, we can share that, because I think that could really help people to just see cardio differently.
Couldn't agree more. Totally.
Yeah. Now, as we're getting to a close here, what are some goals or plans that I know you just started your private gym. So, I mean, what other goals, or how is that going so far?
It's going amazingly well so far. So it's it's not necessarily a new business. It's more so me scaling the business that was already existing. So I kind of briefly mentioned that I had my entire gym, all this equipment that I have in my new gym, I already had, and it was all in my basement, which is it's probably hard to visualize, but it was like a full commercial gym. It was just kind of cramped a little bit, not even really that bad, all into my basement. And I was doing all of my training and stuff out of there. And a little over a year ago, I hired another trainer underneath me who takes clients as well. And we got to the point where we were just kind of struggling. We kind of hit a ceiling, no pun intended. We kind of hit a ceiling as far as like where we could take it in the basement. So it was kind of at that point, like, we need to really scale this thing and move into a commercial location. So I'm actually in a lease to own. So this is kind of a real estate endeavor for me as well. So I will eventually own this building. But in addition to that, it's just a lot more space. So we moved the entire gym into this much bigger space. And I mean, we did our first session, I want to say January 12th, like mid-January. I don't remember the exact date now. So it's only been about 6 weeks or so, and its business is already taken off. Definitely a good decision. So my goals, 99% of my goals lie within growing this,